Let's look at the levels of objectives. So when you create an objective, it could be an outcome objective, it could be an impact objective, and it could be a process objective. And really the main difference between the two is that it could be short-term, it could be medium or intermediate, or it could be a long-term objective or a long-term goal. So let's look at this. If I were to create a program, so such as brushing, for example, and I want the students to learn how to brush. And let's say I follow up with these students, every year. And after, let's say 5 years, I want them to master the brushing technique. That is considered a long-term objective because the program that I have created has been put in place for, let's just say, 5 years. And after 5 years, I want to make sure that they all know how to correctly brush their teeth. Because it's 5 years, so because it's longer than 3, so anytime it's more than 3 years, it is considered a long-term or outcome objective. If I just developed a program and it's been there for, let's say, 2 years, okay, so anytime there's a program that's been there between 1 to 3 years, so let's just say 2 years here, then it is considered an impact objective. So if I want, if my objective is for them to learn how to brush their teeth within, 1 year, or 2 years, or 3 years, that's intermediate, then it is considered an impact objective. If I wanted them to master their brushing, within 4 years or 5 years and maintain it, then that is a long-term outcome objective. Let's say I just went into that school to teach them how to brush and floss. And my objective is, getting them to learn how to brush and floss right after the presentation, then that is a short term because in 1 year or less, or in this case 1 day, you want them to know how to brush and floss. So what's important over here is that if you look at a goal, so let's say you want the oral health of the community to be improved, there's process, there's impact, and there's outcome. And so process refers to short term, that you want them to improve whatever goal you have in mind within 3 months. Well, 3 months, if you go back to the slide, is less than 1 year. So anytime it's 1 year or less, it's a process objective. So 3 months is process. Impact. So impact is outcome is when it's between 1 to 3 years. And so if you look over here, this is all within 2 years, right? So 2 years falls under the impact category. And then outcome is if you want the caries incidence of school children to be reduced by 25% within 4 years. So look at the timeline over here, 4 years. Or if you go back to this slide over here, anything that is long-term, so long-term is more than 3 years, is considered outcome. So if this was a test question, look at the time frame. Is it 3 months? Is it 2 years? Is it 4 years? And then based on that, you can determine what type of level of objective the statement falls under. Lastly, what's really important is when you present the presentation to your audience, it's really important to evaluate your presentation. And there are 2 ways to evaluate. There's something called formative evaluation, and then there's something called summative evaluation. And so formative evaluation is, I have a slide over here that I want to point out, is basically evaluation that you're doing as your instruction. As you're providing the instruction to the students. So while you're doing your presentation, if you find that the students are not paying attention to you, that's an evaluation that you just made, and now you have to change up your strategy to get them to pay attention to you. Okay, so formative evaluation is as you're doing the presentation, you realize that it's not working, and now you gotta change something to make the students more engaged. And so if I go back up to the slide, as a presenter, think about maybe you need to re-explain that concept differently. Maybe you need to backtrack a few steps and get everyone to the same page. Maybe you need to change your whole teaching approach to engage this group of students. So this is actually happening as you are teaching. And so sometimes professors or instructors may have, may in the middle of class, may get you to do these activities to see whether you have grasped the information or not. Summative evaluation is at the very end. So formative evaluation is, maybe you teach them brushing and then you're just checking to see if they learned how to brush. You teach them flossing, you want to make sure they learn how to floss. You teach them nutrition, you're hoping that they understand nutrition. Okay, and as you're teaching, you're checking to see whether they're grasping information, because if they haven't, you're going to modify your teaching technique so that they are able to grasp the method. The last one is summative, and summative evaluation is always done at the end. Okay, so keyword at the end of the program. And so at the end, you could hand out a survey to the group, for example. So if they're like grade 7, grade 8, grade 11, grade 12, you could give them a survey and get them to give you feedback that way. Summative evaluation is always done at the very end of the presentation. So evaluation is a really, really key component to your presentation. You always have to evaluate during the presentation and at the end of the presentation.